Hey guys, we are going to continue to read from the Forgotten Books of Eden, and we are on the story of Ahikar. There are about 7 chapters and an introduction, so I'm going to see how far we can get with this today. Here we go. Okay. We have in the story of Ahikar one of the most ancient sources of human thought and wisdom. Its influence can be traced through the legends of many people, including the Quran and the Old and New Testaments. A mosaic found in Treves, Germany, pictured among the wise men of the world the character Ahikar. Here is his colorful tale. The date of this story has been a subject of lively discussion. Scholars finally put it down about the 1st century when they were proved in error by the original story turning up in an Aramaic papyrus of 500 BC among the ruins of Elephantine. This story is obviously fiction and not history. In fact, the reader can make its acquaintance in the supplementary pages of the Arabian Nights. It is brilliantly written, and the narrative, which is full of action, intrigue, and narrow escape, holds the attention to the last. The liberty of imagination is the most precious possession of the writer. The writing divides itself into 4 phases. 1, the narrative. 2, the teaching, a remarkable series of proverbs. 3, the journey to Egypt. 4, the similitudes of or parables with which Ahikar completes the education of his erring nephew. All right, chapter 1. Ahikar, Grand Vizier of Assyria, has 60 wives, but is fated to have no son. Therefore, he adopts his nephew. He crams him full of wisdom and knowledge more than of bread and water. The story of Ahikar, the wise vizier of Sennacherib, the king, and of Nadan, sister's son to Ahikar, the sage. There was a vizier in the days of King Sennacherib, son of Sarhedem, king of Assyria and Nineveh, a wise man named Ahikar, and he was vizier of the king of Sennacherib. He had a fine fortune and much goods, and he was skillful, wise, a philosopher in knowledge and opinion and in government, and he had married 60 women and had built a castle for each of them. But with it, all he had no children, no child by any of these women who might be his heir. And he was very sad on account of this. And one day he assembled the astrologers and the learned men and the wizards and explained to them his condition and the matter of his barrenness. And they said to him, "Go sacrifice to the gods and beseech them that perchance they may provide thee with a boy." And he did as they told him and offered sacrifices to the idols and besought them and implored them with request and entreaty. And they answered him not one word, and he went away sorrowful and dejected, departed with a pain at his heart. And he returned and implored the Most High God and believed, beseeching him with a burning in his heart, saying, "O Most High God, O Creator of the heavens and of the earth, O Creator of all created things, I beseech thee to give me a boy that I may be consoled by him, that he may be present at my heath, that he may close my eyes, and that he may bury me." Then there came to me a voice saying, "Inasmuch as thou hast relied first of all on graven images, and hast offered sacrifices to them, for this reason thou shalt remain childless thy life long. But take Nadan, thy sister's son, and make him thy child, and teach him thy learning and thy good breeding, and at thy death he shall bury thee." Thereupon he took Nadan, his sister's son, who was a little suckling, and he handed him over to 8 wet nurses that they might suckle him and bring him up. And they brought him up with good food and gentle training and silken clothing and purple and crimson, and he was seated upon couches of silk. And when Nadan grew big and walked, shooting up like a tall cedar, he taught him good manners and writing and science and philosophy. And after many days, King Sennacherib looked at Ahikar and saw that he had grown very old, and moreover he said to him, O my honored friend, the skillful, the trusty, the wise, the governor, my secretary, my vizier, my chancellor and director, verily thou art grown very old and weighted with years, and thy departure from this world must be near. Tell me who shall have a place in my service after thee. And Ahikar said to him, O my lord, may the head live forever. May thy head live forever. There is Nadan, my sister's son. I have made him my child, and I have brought him up and taught him my wisdom and my knowledge. And the king said to him, O Ahikar, bring him to my presence that I may see him, and if I find him suitable, put him in thy place, and thou shalt go thy way, to take a rest and to live the remainder of thy life in sweet repose. Then Ahikar went and presented Nadan, his sister's son, and he did homage and wished him power and honor. And he looked at him and admired him and rejoiced in him, and said to Ahikar, Is this thy son, O Ahikar? I pray that God may preserve him. And as thou hast served me and my father, Sarahadam, so may this boy of thine serve me and fulfill my undertakings, my needs, and my business, so that I may honor him and make him powerful for thy sake. And Ahikar did obeisance to the king and said to him, May thy head live, O my lord the king, forever. I seek from thee that thou mayest be patient with my boy Nadon and forgive his mistakes, that he may serve thee at his fitting. Then the king swore to him that he would make him the greatest of his favorites and the most powerful of his friends, and that he should be with him in all honor and respect. And he kissed his hands and bade him farewell. And he took Nadan, his sister's son, with him, and seated him in a parlor, and set about teaching him night and day, till he had crammed him with wisdom and knowledge more than with bread and water. Chapter 2. A Poor Richard's Almanac of Ancient Days, Immortal Precepts of Human Conduct Concerning Money, Women, Dress, Business, Friends, especially interesting proverbs, are found in verses 12, 17, 23, 37, 45, 47. Compare verse 63 with some of the cynicism of today. Thus he taught him, saying, O my son, hear my speech and follow my advice, and remember what I say. O my son, if thou hearest a word, let it die in thy heart, and reveal it not to another, lest it become a live coal, and burn thy tongue, and cause a pain in thy body, and thou gain a reproach, and art shamed before God and man. O my son, if thou hast heard a report, spread it not, and if thou hast seen something, tell it not. O my son, make thy eloquence easy to the listener, and be not hasty to return an answer. O my son, when thou hast heard anything, hide it not. O my son, loose not a sealed knot, nor untie it, and seal not a loosened knot. O my son, covet not outward beauty, for it wanes and passes away, but an honorable remembrance lasts for aye. For, O my son, let not a silly woman deceive thee with her speech, lest thou die the most miserable of deaths, and she entangle thee in the net till thou art ensnared. O my son, desire not a woman bedizened with dress and with ointments, who is despicable and silly in her soul. Woe o thee if thou bestow on her anything that is thine, or commit to her what is in thine hand, and she entice thee into sin, and God be wroth with thee. O my son, be not like the almond tree, for it brings forth leaves before all the trees, and edible fruit after them. But be like the mulberry tree, which brings forth edible fruit before all the trees, and leaves after them all. O my son, bend thy head low, and soften thy voice, and be courteous, and walk with in the straight path, and be not foolish, and raise not thy voice when thou laughest, for it were by a loud voice that a house was built. The ass would build many houses every day, and if it were by dint of strength that the plow were driven, the plow would never be removed from under the shoulders of the camels. O my son, the removing of stones with a wise man is better than the drinking of water with a sorry man. O my son, pour out thy wine on the tombs of the just, and drink not with ignorant, contemptible people. O my son, cleave to wise men who fear God, and be like them, and go not near the ignorant, lest thou become like him and learn his ways. O my son, when thou hast got thee a comrade or a friend, try him, and afterwards make him a comrade and a friend, and do not praise him without a trial, and do not spoil thy speech with a man who lacks wisdom. O my son, while a shoe stays on thy foot, walk with it on the thorns, and make a road for thy son and for thy household and thy children, and make thy ship taut before she goes on the sea, and its waves and sinks, and cannot he save. Cannot be saved. O my son, if the rich man eat a snake, they say it is by his wisdom, and if a poor man eat it, the people say from his hunger. O my son, be content with thy daily bread and thy goods, and covet not what is another's. O my son, be not neighbor to the fool, and eat not bread with him, and rejoice not in the calamities of thy neighbors. If thine enemy wrongs if thine enemy wrong thee, show him kindness. O my son, a man who fears God, do thou fear him and honor him. O my son, the ignorant man falls and stumbles, and the wise man, even if he stumbles, he is not shaken. Even if he falls, he gets up quickly, and if he is sick, he can take care of his life. But as for the ignorant, stupid man, for his disease there is no drug. O my son, if a man approach who is inferior to thyself, go forward to meet him and remain standing. And if he cannot recompense thee, his Lord will recompense thee for him. O my son, spare not to beat thy son, for the drubbing of thy son is like manure to the ground, and like tying the mouth of a purse, and like the tethering of beasts, and like the bolting of the door. O my son, restrain thy son from wickedness, and teach him manners before he rebels against thee and brings thee into contempt amongst the people, and thou hang thy head in the streets and assemblies, and thou be punished for the evil of his wicked deeds. O my son, get thee a fat ox with a foreskin, and ass great with its hooves, and get not an ox with large horns, nor make friends with a tricky man, nor get quarrelsome slave, nor a thievish handmaid, for everything which thou committest to them will they ruin. O my son, let not thy parents curse thee, and the Lord be pleased with them. For it hath been said, he who despiseth his father or his mother, let him die the death. I mean, the death of sin. And he who honoreth his parents shall prolong his days and his life, and shall see all that is good. O my son, walk not on the road without weapons, for thou knowest not when the foe may meet there, so that thou mayest be ready for him. O my son, be not like a bare, leafless tree that doth not grow, but be like a tree covered with its leaves and its boughs. For the man who has neither wife nor children is disgraced in the world, and is hated by them, like a leafless and fruitless tree. O my son, be like a fruitful tree on the roadside, whose fruit is eaten by all who pass by, and the beasts of the desert rest under its shade and eat of its leaves. O my son, every sheep that wanders from its path and its companions becomes food for the wolf. O my son, say not, my Lord is a fool, and I am wise, and relate not the speech of ignorance and folly, lest thou be despised by him. O my son, be not of those servants to whom their lords say, get away from us, but be one of those to whom they say, approach and come near to us. O my son, caress not thy slave in the presence of his companion, for thou knowest not which of them shall be of most value to thee in the end. O my son, be not afraid of thy Lord who created thee, lest he be silent to thee. O my son, make thy speech fair, and sweeten thy tongue, and permit not thy companion to tread on thy foot, lest he tread at another time on thy breast. O my son, if thou beat a wise man with a word of wisdom, it will lurk in his breast like a subtle sense of shame. But if thou drub the ignorant with a stick, he will neither understand nor hear. O my son, if thou send a wise man for thy needs, do not give him many orders, for he will do thy business as thou desirest. And if thou send a fool, do not order him, but go thyself and go thy business and do thy business. For if thou order him, he will not do what thou desirest. If they send thee on business, hasten to fulfill it quickly. O my son, make not an enemy of a man stronger than thyself, for he will take thy measure and his revenge on awnings to them, lest they make away with them. For he who hath a full hand is called wise, even if he be stupid and ignorant. And he who hath an empty hand is called poor, ignorant, even if he be the prince of sages. O my son, I have eaten a colocynth and swallowed aloes, and I have found nothing more bitter than poverty and scarcity. O my son, teach thy son frugality and hunger, that he may do well in the management of his household. O my son, teach not to the ignorant language of wise men, for it will be burdensome to him. O my son, display not thy condition to thy friend, lest thou be despised by him. O my son, the blindness of the heart is more grievous than the blindness of the eyes. For the blindness of the eyes may be guided little by little, but the blindness of the heart is not guided, and it leaves the straight path and goes in a crooked way. O my son, the stumbling of a man with his foot is better than the stumbling of a man with his tongue. O my son, a friend who is near is better than a more excellent brother who is far away. O my son, beauty fades, but learning lasts, and the world wanes and becomes vain. But a good name neither becomes vain nor wanes. O my son, the man who hath no rest, his death were better than his life. And the sound of weeping is better than the sound of singing. For sorrow and weeping, if the fear of God be in them, are better than the sound of singing and rejoicing. O my child, the thigh of a frog is in thy hand is better than a goose in the pot of thy neighbor, and a sheep near thee is better than an ox far away. And a sparrow in thy hand is better than 1,000 sparrows flying, and poverty which gathers is better than the scattering of much provision. And a living fox is better than a dead lion, and a pound of wool is better than a pound of wealth. I mean, of gold and silver, for the gold and the silver are hidden and covered up in the earth and are not seen, but the wool stays in the markets and it is seen, and it is a beauty to him who wears it. O my son, a small fortune is better than a scattered fortune. O my son, a living dog is better than a dead poor man. O my son, a poor man who does right is better than a rich man who is dead in sins. O my son, keep a word in thy heart, and it shall be much to thee. And beware lest thou reveal the secret of thy friend. O my son, let not a word issue from the mouth till thou hast taken counsel with thy heart, and stand not betwixt persons quarreling, because from a bad word there comes a quarrel, and from a quarrel there comes war, and from war there comes fighting, and thou wilt be forced to bear witness, but run from thence and rest thyself. O my son, withstand not a man stronger than thyself, but get thee a patient spirit and endurance and an upright conduct, for there is nothing more excellent than that. O my son, hate not thy first friend, for the second one may not last. O my son, visit the poor in his affliction, and speak of him in the Sultan's presence, and do thy diligence to save him from the mouth of the lion. O my son, rejoice not the death of thine enemy, for after a little while thou shalt be his neighbor, and him who mocks thee do thou respect and honor, and be beforehand with him in greeting. O my son, if water would stand still in heaven, and a black crow become white, and myrrh grows sweet as honey, then ignorant men and fools might understand and become wise. O my son, if thou desire to be wise, restrain thy tongue from lying, and thy hand from stealing, and thine eyes from beholding evil. Then thou wilt be called wise. O my son, let the wise man beat thee with a rod, but let not the fool anoint thee with sweet salve. be humble in thy youth, and thou shalt be honored in thine old age. O my son, withstand not a man in the days of his power, not a river in the days of its flood. O my son, be not hasty in the wedding of a wife, for if it turns out well, she will say, my Lord, make provision for me. And if it turns out ill, she will rate at him who was the cause of it. O my son, whosoever is elegant in his dress, he is the same in his speech. And he who has a mean appearance in his dress, he also is the same in his speech. O my son, if thou hast committed a theft, make it known to the sultan, and give him a share of it, that thou mayest be delivered from him, for otherwise thou wilt endure bitterness. O my son, make a friend of the man whose hand is satisfied and filled, and make no friend of the man whose hand is closed and hungry. Therefore, there are four things in which neither the king nor his army can be secure: oppression by the vizier, and bad government, and perversion of the will, and tyranny over the subject, and four things which cannot be hidden: the prudent, and the foolish, and the rich, and the poor. All right, chapter 3. Ahikar retires from active participation in affairs of state. He turns over his possessions to his treacherous nephew. Here is the amazing story of how a thankless profligate turns forgerer. A clever plot to entangle Ahikar results in his being condemned to death. Apparently, the end of Ahikar. Thus spake Ahikar, and when he had finished these injunctions in Proverbs to Nadin, his sister's son, he imagined that he would keep them all, and he knew not that instead of that he was displaying to him weariness and contempt and mockery. Thereafter Ahikar sat still in his house and delivered over to Nadin all his goods, and the slaves, and the handmaidens, and the horses, and the cattle, and everything else that he had possessed and gained, and the power of bidding and of forbidding remained in the land of Nadin, in the hand of Nadin. And Ahikar sat at rest in his house, and every now and then Ahikar went and paid his respects to the king and returned home. Now, when Nadin perceived that the power of bidding and forbidding was in his own hand, he despised the position of Ahikar and scoffed at him, and set about blaming him whenever he appeared, saying, my uncle Ahikar is in his dotage, and he knows nothing now. And he began to beat the slaves and the handmaidens, and to sell the horses and the camels, and be spendthrift with all that his uncle Ahikar had owned. And when Ahikar saw that he had no compassion on his servants nor on his household, he arose and chased him from his house, and sent to inform the king that he had scattered his possessions and his provision. And the king arose and called Nadin and said to him, whilst Ahikar remains in health, no one shall rule over his goods, nor over his household, nor over his possessions. And at the hand of Nadin was lifted off from his uncle Ahikar and from all his goods, and in the meantime he went neither in nor out, nor did he greet him. Thereupon Ahikar repented him of his toil with Nadin, his sister's son, and he continued to be very sorrowful. And Nadin had a younger brother named Benuzardan. So Ahikar took him to himself in place of Nadin, and brought up and honored him with the utmost honor. And he delivered over to him all that he possessed, and made him governor of his house. When Nadin perceived what had happened, he was seized with envy and jealousy, and he began to complain to everyone who questioned him, and to mock his uncle Ahikar, saying, my uncle has chased me from his house, and has preferred my brother to me. But if the Most High God give me the power, I shall bring up him the misfortune of being killed. And Nadin continued to meditate as to the stumbling block he might contrive for him. And after a while, Nadin turned it over in his mind, and wrote a letter to Achish, son of Shai the wise, king of Persia, saying thus, peace and health and might and honor from Sennacherib, king of Assyria and Nineveh, and from his vizier and his secretary Ahikar, unto thee, O great king. Let there be pence between thee and me. And when this letter reaches thee, if thou wilt arise and go quickly to the plain of Nisrin, into Assyria and Nineveh, I will deliver up the kingdom to thee without war and without battle array. And he wrote also another letter in the name of Ahikar to Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Let there be peace between thee and me, O mighty king. If at the time of this letter reaching thee thou wilt arise and go to Assyria and Nineveh to the plain of Nisrin, I will deliver up to thee the kingdom without war and without fighting. And the writing of Nadan was like to the writing of his uncle Ahikar. Then he folded the two letters and sealed them with the seal of his uncle Ahikar. They were nevertheless in the king's palace. Then he went and wrote a letter likewise from the king to his uncle Ahikar. Peace and health to my vizier, my secretary, my chancellor Ahikar. O Ahikar, when this letter reaches thee, assemble all the soldiers who are with thee, and let them be perfect in clothing and in numbers, and bring them to me on the 5th day in the plain of Nisrin. And when thou shalt see me there coming towards thee, haste and make the army move against me as an army who would fight with me. For I have with me the ambassadors of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, that they may see the strength of our army and may fear us, for they are our enemies and they hate us. Then he sealed the letter and sent to Ahikar by one of the king's servants, and he took the other letter which he had written and spread it before the king and read it to him and showed him the seal. And when the king heard what was in the letter, he was perplexed with a great perplexity and was wroth with a great and fierce wrath and said, Ah, I have shown my wisdom, what I have done to Ahikar, that he has written these letters to my enemies. Is this my recompense from him for my benefits to him? Nadan said to him, Be not grieved, O king, nor be wroth, but let us go to the plain of Nisrin and see if the tale be true or not. Then Nadan arose on the 5th day and took the king and the soldiers and the vizier, and they went to the desert to the plain of Nisrin. And the king looked, and lo, Ahikar and the army were set in array. And when Ahikar saw that the king was there, he approached and signaled to the army to move as in war and to fight in an array against the king, as it had been found in the letter, he not knowing what a pit Nadan had digged for him. And when the king saw the act of Ahikar, he was seized with anxiety and terror and perplexity, and was wroth with a great wrath. And Nadan said to him, Hast thou seen, O my lord the king, what this wretch has done? Be not thou wroth, and be not grieved nor pained, but go to thy house and sit on thy throne, and I will bring Ahikar to thee bound and chained with chains, and I will chase away thine enemy from thee without toil. And the king returned to his throne, being provoked about Ahikar, and did nothing concerning him. And Nadan went to Ahikar and said to him, Wahala, O my uncle, the king verily rejoiceth in thee with great joy, and thanks thee for having done what he commanded thee. And now he has sent me to thee, that thou mayest dismiss the soldiers to their duties, and come thyself to him with thy hands bound behind thee and thy feet chained, and the ambassadors of Pharaoh may see this, and that the king may be feared by them and by their king. Then answered Ahikar and said, To hear is to obey. And he arose straightway and bound his hands behind him and chained his feet. And Nadan took him and went with him to the king. And when Ahikar entered the king's presence, he did obeisance before him on the ground and wished for power and perpetual life to the king. Then said the king, O Ahikar, my secretary, the governor of my affairs, my chancellor, the ruler of my state, tell me what evil have I done to thee, that thou hast rewarded me by this ugly deed? Then they showed him the letters in his writing and with his seal. And when Ahikar saw this, his limbs trembled and his tongue was tied at once. And he was unable to speak a word from fear, but he hung his head towards the earth and was dumb. And when the king saw this, he felt certain that the thing was from him. And he straightway arose and commanded them to kill Ahikar and to strike his neck with the sword outside the city. Then Nadan screamed and said, O Ahikar, O black face, what avails thee thy meditation or thy power in the doing of this deed to the king? Thus says the storyteller, and the name of the swordsman was Abu Samik. And the king said to him, O swordsman, arise, go, cleave the neck of Hakar at the door of his house, and cast away his head from his body 100 cubits. Then Hakar knelt before the king and said, Let my lord the king live forever, and if thou desire to slay me, let thy wish be fulfilled. And I know that I am not guilty, but the wicked man has Bass to give an account of his wickedness. Nevertheless, O my lord the king, I beg of thee, and of thy friendship, permit the swordsman to give my body to my slaves, that they may bury me, and let thy slave be thy sacrifice. The king arose and commanded the swordsman to do with him according to his desire. And he straightway commanded his servant to take Hakar and the swordsman and go with him naked, that they might slay him. And when Hakar knew for certain that he was to be slain, he sent to his wife and said to her, Come out and meet me, and let there be with thee 1,000 young virgins, and dress them in gowns of purple and silk, that they may weep for me before my death. And prepare a table for the swordsman and for his servants, and mingle plenty of wine that they may drink. And she did all that he commanded her, and she was very wise, clever, and prudent. And she united all possible courtesy and learning. And when the army of the king and the swordsman arrived, the found found the table set in order, and the wine and the luxurious viands, and they began eating and drinking till they were gorged and drunken. Then Hakar took the swordsman aside, apart from the company, and said, O Abu Samik, dost thou not know that when Sarhadam, the king, the father of Sennacherib, wanted to kill thee, I took thee and hid thee in a certain place, till the king's anger subsided, and he asked for thee. And when I brought thee into his presence, he rejoiced in thee. And now remember the kindness I did thee. And I know that the king will repent him about me, and will be wroth with great wrath about my execution. For I am not guilty. And it shall be, when thou shalt present me before him in his palace, thou shalt meet with great good fortune, and know that Nadan, my sister's son, has deceived me and has done this bad deed to me, and the king will repent of having slain me. And now I have a cellar in the garden of my house, and no one knows of it. Hide me in it with the knowledge of my wife, and I have a slave in prison who deserves to be killed. Bring him out and dress him in my clothes, and command the servants when they are drunk to slay him. They will not know who it is they are killing. And cast away his head 100 cubits from his body, and give his body to my slaves, that they may bury it. And thou shalt have laid up a great treasure with me. And then the swordsman did as Hakar had commanded him, and he went to the king and said to him, May thy head live forever. Then Hakar's wife let down to him in the hiding place every week what sufficed for him, and no one knew of it but herself. And the story was reported and repeated and spread abroad in every place, of how Hakar the sage had been slain and was dead, and all the people of that city mourned for him, and then wept and said, Alas for thee, O Hakar, and for thy learning and thy courtesy, how sad about thee and about thy knowledge. Where can another like thee be found? And where can there be a man so intelligent, so learned, so skilled in ruling, as to resemble thee, that he may fill thy place? But the king was repenting about Hakar, and his repentance availed him not. Then he called for Nadan and said to him, Go and take thy friends with thee, and make a mourning and a weeping for thy uncle Hakar, and lament for him, as the custom is, doing honor to his memory. But when Nadan the foolish, the ignorant, the hard-hearted went to the house of his uncle, he neither wept nor sorrowed nor wailed, but assembled heartless and dissolute people, and set about eating and drinking. And Nadan began to seize the maidservants and the slaves belonging to Hakar, and bound them and tortured them, and drubbed them with a sore drubbing. And he did not respect the wife of his uncle, she who had brought him up like her own boy, but wanted her to fall into sin with him. But Hakar had been cut into the hiding place and he heard the weeping of his slaves and his neighbors, and he praised the Most High God, the merciful one, and gave thanks. And he always prayed and besought the Most High God. And the swordsman came from time to Ahikar whilst he was in the midst of the hiding place. And Ahikar came and entreated him, and he comforted him and wished him deliverance. And when the story was reported in other countries that Ahikar the sage had been slain, all the kings were grieved and despised King Sennacherib, and they lamented over Ahikar, the solver of riddles. Okay, guys, we're going to end it there. We're already at 34 minutes. Thanks for watching and listening. Bye.